So Sudeep, we just got off 2 exciting days of presentations here at CREB. We had sold-out performances by yourself, coming in from Vancouver, talking to crowds about programmatic digital display advertising. I know it's a mouthful, but I think you did a great job in terms of explaining it for those who want a little bit of a snapshot, a little bit of a reminder, or for those who just couldn't come. How would you play back to us how it went?
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. First of all, fantastic turnout. Really excited to come and speak to the realtors, realizing full well it's a tough market, and a lot of realtors are challenged with what's going on, with home prices. But it was really good to see the response, the questions that were asked in the room. One thing that really stood out for me was the thirst for knowledge and the thirst for getting a better understanding of what's going on with digital marketing. And my company, we operate on a technology neutral, technology agnostic view of marketing, and that's really what I wanted to get across. Is there's a lot of noise in the marketplace. The way people are consuming and sharing content has changed, and if you're still stuck in the old ways of marketing, for example, if you're still doing bus benches and traditional media, and that's all you're doing today, you're missing out on a huge opportunity to reach people in those moments of importance when they are looking for real estate services in the neighborhoods that you're operating out of. And so with programmatic advertising, which is where my expertise and experience lay in, that's really what I was trying to get across is, how can you leverage, some of these new ways to market to consumers and do so in a smart way. And I think that, based on the feedback that I've received, from people who came up after the presentation, I think that was really well received. What surprised me was, there was not a lot of experience and understanding of the space. And so I'm happy to have been able to share some of my experiences and expertise when it came to programmatic advertising.
Awesome. So let's take it a step back a little bit. You mentioned your company, Index Digital. When you talk to your mom, how do you explain what you do?
She still doesn't understand what I do. So it's really, really challenging. Nobody really understands outside of the marketing sphere what exactly I do, but simply put, I look at it as when you look at the stock market and you're trading stocks with various companies, yeah, you're essentially buying stock in a company. And to some degree, programmatic advertising is just that. With the fragmentation of media and people in so many different areas, from Facebook to mobile apps to websites, how are you supposed to get scale? It's virtually impossible to go and do deals with all these individual publishers, for example. Mm-hmm. So what programmatic advertising allows you to do is it allows you to basically get that scale, purchase inventory across multiple different sources using a single point of contact. And you do that in a way that's based on supply and demand to a degree. So for example, certain websites may cost more during certain times of the month, just like stock prices go up and down. So essentially that allows you to do it in a very seamless fashion, allows you to track everything, and more importantly, allows you to get the reach that you need in our marketplace. So with programmatic advertising, the reach is virtually blanket in any market, in any trading area, because you have access to vast sums of inventory.
Awesome. So programmatic digital display advertising, it's a mouthful. Let's break it down. I mean, the way I interpret it is that you can program where your ads go online. Am I correct?
Yes. Essentially, you can define what criteria you want to reach. So for example, let's say you're operating in downtown Calgary and you want to reach, the 20-something-year-olds who are looking to purchase their first property. So that's a criteria, that's an audience persona, for example, that you really want to hit. Those audience sets are available in the programmatic world. You can define who your audiences are, you can define what websites you want to run on, and you can define the geography that you need to run on. And all of that can be done pretty easily. And that's what's really attractive, and that's why programmatic advertising as a medium is growing 3 to 4 times year over year.
Okay. So could I call it almost like you talked about being able to target a neighborhood, bus benches, a typical advertising tool for realtors, has always been a good access point into a neighborhood to kind of establish a brand. Could digital advertising, or programmatic as we like to call it, could it be kind of equated to like a digital bus bench?
To a certain degree, yes. I think the challenge, and I even had a couple of realtors come up to me who have been buying bus benches, and I never really like to knock one medium. I think every single, marketing medium has a place.
Yeah.
I think what you'd really need to start to do is, if you've been running bus benches and you're not seeing, for example, returns on those bus benches after a year, after 12 months, that type of thing, then you really need to start to look at, other mediums. And I think what programmatic advertising offers, it does offer that bus bench neighborhood type of targeting, but you can also overlay on top of that. So say, for example, you want to reach a specific neighborhood, but within that neighborhood, you only want to reach, parents with kids, because the types of properties that you're selling appeals to parents with kids. Then that's what programmatic can do. It can go down a few more layers, so you're not just targeting everybody in a specific neighborhood, which you can, but you can get a lot more granular.
So you're not wasting money.
You're not wasting money. Every dollar that you're spending can go further.
Yeah.
You can use a combination of tactics, for example. So say you're a realtor and you want to brand yourself in the marketplace, you're relatively new, or you've got some new property development that you want to market. So you could use, a general level targeting and basically target all of that neighborhood.
Yeah.
But then you also have within that targeting criteria very specific types of audiences who may be high value audiences to you.
Yeah.
So you could use additional layers and filters like demographic, age, even ethnicity, things like that, to be able to drill down and make your budgets go a lot further.
Awesome. What about remarketing? I hear it a lot. I think I've probably experienced it when I've gone to Amazon and tried to buy something. In layman's terms, break it down for me.
Yeah, and I can give a great example. There is a company out of Vancouver that is Indochino. And so if anybody tells me, hey, listen, I don't know what exactly remarketing is, I said, okay, go to Indochino and then go anywhere on the internet. You'll see an Indochino ad follow you around. That's really a remarketing in its purest form. So essentially, you as an advertiser are marketing yourselves in a number of different ways. And it's, the point being is that you want to be able to get people to come to your website, because that shopping experience, that purchase decision starts with people coming to your website. That's the first point of contact, typically, regardless if you're selling a product, a service, or anything. So most people that come to your website do not convert. And Google had a study which pointed to the fact that only 4% of people ever convert on that first visit. So say you're a realtor and you're running, bus benches, you're running, some print advertising, you're doing a little bit of radio, maybe some digital, some Facebook, and you get all these people coming to your website. And let's say you've got somebody in, a neighborhood that you're working out of, looking for a realtor, but they don't have a realtor that they worked with, so they're shopping around. So they're driving by, they see a bus bench, maybe they're on Facebook, based on their search results, Facebook serving them one of your ads, but your competition's also doing the same thing. So if you don't have a remarketing campaign running, and if you've got someone who visited your website and you don't have an opportunity to re-engage with them, and if your competition is running remarketing campaigns, there's a greater chance that your competition is going to be able to win that person as a customer. Because what research has pointed to, and Google's done an extensive study on this, is that when you do run remarketing, it does help you increase your conversions and lower the overall cost per acquisition. So as a critical component for any marketing, digital marketing, I recommend to my clients to have a remarketing plan and have a remarketing budget in place, because it not only helps your online efforts, certainly helps your offline efforts. And it's a real sort of one of those critical components in how you could change the messaging to be a more stronger call to action. So somebody's visited, they know you exist. So sell them something else, saying that you've been in business for X amount of years, or you sold these many homes, or you know that market. So switching up your creative when it comes to remarketing is also a critical component.
So to play it back to you, somebody visits your website, somebody leaves your website, somebody goes to another website, they see your ad. It's maybe not necessarily the same ad, maybe something a little different. Is there something in that messaging that looks different? Is it a call to action, or is it, hey, we miss you, come on back, or what is it?
Right, so when somebody visits your website, they've discovered you, they know that you exist.
Yeah.
They know you're a realtor, you're operating out of this certain area, certain neighborhood in Calgary, for example. So when you have that opportunity to remarket to them, it's a great opportunity to educate further. And by that, what I mean is letting them know that, for example, you've been in this market for the last 20 years. You know single-family homes, or you sold this much worth of inventory in the last year.
Yeah.
Use that opportunity to build trust, to educate, to give, impart some knowledge. So there's lots of different things that you can do, and those are great opportunities. If you think of, how often you'd be able to get in front of somebody who's engaged with your website, once they leave, it is limited. And remarketing, time and time again, has proven to be one of the most, if not the most cost-effective way, even beyond search, when it comes to helping you convert those customers.
Kind of answered my next question, but it works?
It absolutely works. I run remarketing campaigns for all different types of clients, from the very local level right to the national level. Yeah. And quite often I work with a lot of search and social media agencies, and what we do at the end of the month is we compare the cost per click and the cost per acquisition numbers for their search budgets, for their social media budgets, and for their remarketing budgets. And often remarketing is one of the top performing budgets when it comes to conversions. And the conversions, I mean, is by did somebody make a phone call? Did somebody sign up for your newsletter or fill out a form or something like that? So whatever the conversion metric is that you determine, very often that we're meeting or exceeding those goals, as opposed to some of the other tactics available.
Awesome. Now, without getting too technical, I do want to kind of come back to the data, which I know really is behind all this. Without the data, how are you supposed to target them based on a location, based on behavior, based on context? And the comment I always get mostly is, man, it sounds really Big Brother-ish. How do you do it? How do you do it? So, kind of peeking behind the curtain a little bit without getting too technical, how do you do it?
So, great question, and it's something that I get asked for on almost every sales call that I'm on. So with online browsing and all the activity that we're doing online, so by that I mean, the searches you're doing on Google, the social media information that you're sharing on Facebook, your brand affinities, the things that you're liking, videos that you're watching, even things like checkout data, shopping cart information on Amazon or eBay. All of that are little data sets that define you. It's what I call your digital footprint, so to speak. And all of that make up a profile, and everybody has a individual profile based on their interests, their likes, things that they're watching. All of that is taken. There are, you've got your big data companies like Google and Facebook that have a lot of, great data from Gmail and from Facebook login information. But there are also other data companies, some of them that you may have heard of, like Experian or Comscore or Nielsen. And these data companies have a number of different areas that they focus on, whether it's consumer data, whether it's B2B data, whether it's demographic data, ethnicity, so on and so forth. So based on your digital activity, different data companies track, segment, and identify demographics based on all these different criteria. And that is taken, the data is anonymized, so every single one of these companies that collects data on people's browsing habits takes data integrity and protection very seriously. Mm-hmm. So all the data is anonymized. So for example, as a advertiser, the advertiser's not going to know that it's you, where you live, your email, things like that.
Thank God.
But they would know, for example, your age, the neighborhood that you're in, mm-hmm. The type of vehicle that you drive, the types of movies that you like, for example, mm-hmm. whether you're married or not, whether you've got kids in the household or not. So all that data is taken, it's paired up with publishers on a massive scale. So regardless of whether you're on Facebook or you're on CNN or the Calgary Herald, you can overlay this data sets either at the neighborhood level or right down to the national level, for example, and basically find those specific types of audiences. So for example, if you're looking for newlyweds in downtown Calgary, you have that ability to do that. And data really helps you to do that on a scale.
Okay, so you have access to this data. Presumably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but an intermediary like yourself or somebody else is working with companies that give you access to the data, and then you build campaigns around the need of the client, and then the data that you can kind of align the two. Is that would that be an accurate description? I guess the question I'm getting to is, if I'm a member of CREB, and this all sounds really great, I want to get started. What's my first step? Where do I go? What do I do?
I think the first, there's three things, when I presented to the realtors over the course of the two days, I talked about three things that they really need to identify. So, you like the idea of remarketing, you like the fact that you have the ability to reach very specific audiences, you're extremely interested in executing a campaign, and you're really trying to figure out what to do next. Three things I suggest is, we haven't talked about creative, but I will touch upon it in this answer is, when you're working with a vendor, make sure that they are experts in what they're doing. Identify the personas. So every single realtor has different types of buyers. And you could look at, your past transaction history. You could look at the neighborhoods that you're operating within. You could look at potential types of buyers that you may not be reaching with your current marketing mix. Look at all of that and say, who do I want to reach? Who are my highest value clients, and what do they look like? Do I deal with mainly seniors? Do I deal with families with kids? Am I dealing with singles, with newlyweds, with people of various ethnicities? So coming from Vancouver, I can say that a lot of the realtors are very interested in marketing to specific ethnicities because neighborhoods are divided, in some cases on ethnic levels. So looking at all those personas and types of buyers is extremely critical. It's sort of a starting point, because if you cannot identify who you're trying to reach, it makes it very difficult. Once you identify those types of people that you want to reach, it makes the job of executing a campaign against those personas very easy. You do have the ability, because the last thing you want to do is kind of spray and pray mentality, is like, let's put it all out there, which is okay. It's okay if you're doing a branding campaign, but that shouldn't be all that you do all the time. So identify those personas. And the last piece is creative, is, the success of campaigns when it comes to programmatic advertising. You've got this amazing data, you've got reach, but equally important is creative. Because unless your creative makes an emotional connection to those audiences, it's going to be just one of those ads that no one pays attention to online. So there's lots of things that you can do when it comes to creative. Things like, your background color. And there's a great piece of research that I shared during the presentation, how background color in an ad actually affects conversions. So red backgrounds perform significantly better than ads with black backgrounds. Where your logo is positioned in an ad has a profound impact on whether people convert or not. And call to action. So certain keywords perform much better than other keywords. And so creative is an extremely important component. Educate, use that opportunity to tell people what you do. There should be an incentive for people on why they would need to either click or visit your website after seeing that ad. So there's a lot of ingredients that go into making a successful campaign. It does take effort. It does take time. There has to be some application and need from the realtors to be able to want to make that effort to execute successful campaigns. And the ones that have, have seen an increase in traffic, increase in number of clients calling on them, and so on. Just like with anything else, the execution has to be there. Creative is a critical component.
So there's not a one solution fits all approach in digital marketing, is there, or is there?
There isn't, and that's really what we're trying to, when I started Index.Digital, one of the sort of pain points that I saw from a lot of clients is that they felt there was too much of that. There's too much of, a marketing agency, having a one-stop shop, cookie cutter type programs, regardless for what the client size was, client's budgets, so on and so forth. So what we've tried to take is really take that personalized approach, because every single realtor, I'm sure, has a different market, different backgrounds, maybe at different stages in their careers, for example, maybe have different motivations. All those things need to be taken into consideration when it comes to campaign planning, and really trying to figure out exactly how we can best reach those people that they're trying to reach. And maybe programmatic isn't the answer right now. Yeah. There's lots of different channels, but if you are going to execute a programmatic campaign, for example, there's certain best practices and things that you absolutely need to have.
Okay. When it comes time to setting up that meeting or engaging with a vendor, you said obviously pick a trusted expert. You also mentioned, of course, doing your research, knowing your audience, I guess, if you will. Is that something that is mutually exclusive from a relationship with a vendor? Or is that something that a vendor will typically work with you in terms of helping to identify that audience, helping to identify some of that key creative messaging, or really are members of CREB kind of are they on their own when it comes to making those decisions? Or is it pretty industry standard for them to have that kind of support, that advisor to help them with all the places? And do they have to go to multiple places? Do they have to go one place to buy their remarketing? Do they have to go to one place to buy their behavior? Or do they have to go one place to buy their contextual? What's the standard here?
Yeah, typically a vendor that provides media buying services should be able to do all of that. They should be able to run your behavior, your remarketing, your contextual, your website, all that. They should be able to do all of that together. When it comes to identifying personas and strategizing on building a campaign, that certainly is done in conjunction with the realtor and the vendor. So it's the realtor that would go to the vendor and says, this is, here's a little bit about me. Here's the neighborhood I'm operating out of. Here's the type of homes that I've been selling. Here's what's going on in my marketplace. I'm finding that there's a lot of new people moving into the neighborhood from another neighborhood. So could we target that other neighborhood, for example? And when a realtor provides as much information about who they are and what they're trying to do, that helps the campaign planner tremendously. Because the more information that you can provide, the better built campaigns, you can have structured. If you don't, there may be guesswork, and I'm certainly not a believer in having guesswork go into campaign planning.
Awesome. Let's talk cheddar. That's what everybody wants to talk about here. This sounds great. I want to do it. What's my expectations that I should have when running a digital ad campaign? I know it's a tough question to answer because it varies, but maybe talk about lows, highs, medians. What can people expect to see when they're going to book their first digital campaign?
It's a question I get a lot from my clients. I've got some certain sort of standards and practices that I put into place. It's important to set those expectations up front. Most of the clients I deal with, we do 90-day runs, because it does take time with optimizations and all of that to kick in for your campaign to be fully optimized and ramped up. So 90-day window when it comes to your campaign planning efforts and execution. When you're executing various tactics, whether it's contextual behavior, remarketing, you do have that ability of, the longer the time frame, you have, better data sets to see what's working and, more importantly, what's not working. When it comes to, budgets and spend levels, that really varies. It depends on how narrow, how wide you want to go with respect to your targeting. But with like anything, what we really focus on is the quality of those conversions, reaching the right audiences, and executing creative in an extremely, meaningful way that elicits that emotional connection with the end user. I wish there was a sort of a one-stop, sort of what you can expect from a benchmark standpoint. I can talk about what general benchmarks I usually see with respect to, clicks and conversions. But again, it varies. It varies on the type of, properties that you are marketing. It varies, by how well you are actually known in the community on day one of your campaign. Have you done a lot of work? Do people already recognize your name? And I've seen, for example, with some realtors that have a lot of brand equity in the marketplace, their campaigns tend to do better, right out of the gate. For ones that, nobody really knows about, or they've, focused too narrow on an audience right out of the gate, the responses may not be as strong. But generally speaking, what I've seen with, for example, remarketing campaigns, you can expect a conversion rate of anywhere between 1% to 5%. And so to put that in perspective, typically with search campaigns, you expect to see like a 1% conversion rate.
Okay. Is it kind of a you get what you pay for scenario in the digital marketing world?
Absolutely, just like with anything. What I've seen, working in Vancouver for the last decade, there were a lot of agencies, a lot of companies out there selling cheap inventory.
How cheap? Like what's cheap?
Cheap as in $1, $1.50 CPM.
And the CPM, just to clarify, is?
So CPM is essentially the monetary system with digital marketing. It's based on how many times that ad is exposed or seen on a web page.
Per thousand.
So it's cost per thousand.
Okay, so $1, $1.50 per 1,000 impressions, or how many times it's been seen.
Right.
Loaded, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So, for example, when I talk about $1.50 cost per 1,000, essentially what that means is that for every 1,000 times that ad is delivered on a website, it costs $1.50.
And then how many impressions is in a typical campaign? You mentioned 90 days being what you like to set up your clients at. Are we talking hundreds of thousands of impressions?
Yeah, so a 90-day campaign typically would be anywhere between 300,000 to 500,000 impressions.
Okay.
So just sort of going back to the whole quantity versus quality. So for a long time, there were a lot of players in, providing cheap quality inventory. Now, you can get that. They could be on that blog someone's running, at the end of your street. They made that website available on Google. There's some inventory there. Is it the best environment to be in? Maybe, maybe not. But if you want to get on good quality sites and you spend a long time building your brand in the marketplace, why take that risk of appearing on a questionable site, for example? So just like anything in life, you pay $1.50, you're not going to get the premium websites. So for example, the Globe and Mail, depending on the day of the month, it could go anywhere between $10 CPM to $20 CPM.
So you're going from $1.50 almost to $20.
Right. It really comes down to, your $1.50 campaign. Yes, it looks great on paper. You're getting all this inventory. It's pretty cheap. Is it hitting the right audience? Is it converting? Are you getting the results that you need to? If not, yes, it looked great, but you didn't get any conversions. So I think it's important to look at quality versus quantity, and you really get what you pay for. Where I've seen a lot of success is those clients running on premium quality sites like the daily newspaper sites, or the daily the radio stations, the TV station sites, even on international websites that have Canadian audiences. So for example, in Canada, about 7 million Canadians visit the New York Times on a monthly basis. That's a staggering number.
Wow.
But at least once during the month, a Canadian visits the New York Times. And that cumulative total is 7 million Canadians end up doing that on a monthly basis. That's a lot of traffic coming out of Canada on a well-known, reputable site. And so For example, if you have somebody in Calgary on the New York Times, you do have that ability to target them.
So I'm a Calgarian, I'm going onto the New York Times site, I could see a local ad.
Yes.
People in New York, they're opening that same site, they're not seeing it.
They're not seeing it. As long as the campaign is geo-targeted to whether it's a postal code or a list of postal codes in Calgary or all of Calgary or even Alberta, for example, you can select the geography. It'll only appear within that geography.
I would think working with a provider that have access to inventory on sites like New York Times, you'd probably be able to get on that site a lot cheaper than if you were to call up New York Times, if you so choose, and try to purchase that yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
is that really the benefit of kind of working with a network?
yes, yes. So I think you're getting the scale, the efficiency. You're also getting it at a price that's significantly less. So you do have that ability to go and call the New York Times, but then if you want to get scale, you might have to do dozens, if not hundreds of calls on all different kinds of publishers to be able to get inventory. And how inventory is actually possible is most publishers, on any given day, 50% to 60% of the inventory is unsold. So they do have a direct sales channel. They have sales reps, at the New York Times, the Herald, and all of that, selling the inventory, but they can't fulfill all that inventory. So any unsold inventory is made available through an auction system, and that's where you can come in, get a number of sites, overlay that with data, overlay that with specific area, geography, and be able to get scale and reach.
So how does digital advertising play into members of CREB, whether they're a small, one-person shop, they've just gotten into the business and they have, a relatively small marketing budget. And on the flip side, how, if you're a large power broker in this town or you have a large team, how would this same offering benefit me?
That's the beauty of programmatic advertising. It can scale down to a very localized, hyper-local, single postal code, few neighborhood type of, budget, and it can also scale up to the brokerage level, for example. And I've worked with, brokerages in my publishing life, helping them market themselves programmatically. So, for example, with a brokerage, I think it'll be extremely critical from, let's say, remarketing to be able to, remarket that brokerage to anybody who's visiting that brokerage's website. That's a great way to get your brand and your name out there, and it's pretty competitive at the brokerage level. So that would be something that you could also share with the brokers, at that particular brokerage, saying that, hey, listen, we're branding, we're remarketing, and we're doing all of this, and that's really, indirectly benefiting the individual brokers. When it comes to like someone who's sort of just getting started out, who's got a very small budget, what I would suggest to them is that unless you market yourselves, regardless of how big or how small you are, you're not going to go out there and get customers. And I think it's extremely critical that you're at least able to execute some form of digital marketing, even if you're a small broker starting off. Because unless you do that, it's really difficult to market somebody else if you're not marketing yourself. And at the end of the day, you could look at it as cost that you can get, for example, amortize over a period of time. But you could then just select, listen, if I only had this much budget, let's say $500 a month or less, even, for example, you got to be pretty prudent and very, very surgical in terms of who you're trying to reach. You may not be able to reach everybody that you hope for, but maybe it's your highest value type of clients that you really need to look at. So, for example, let's say your customers are in the entertainment industry, and you want to be able to reach people who are employed in the entertainment industry as a way of, marketing to them. So just select that audience set within the city of Calgary, for example. And that way, full well that 100% of your budget is reaching that very, very, narrow sliver of audiences. So you don't need to have, mass budget. So for example, if you need to go and execute a campaign, let's say on radio or on TV or on your daily newspaper, you're paying for all that distribution in the city. So a lot of your budget could be going to audiences that may never end up calling you. So with digital, it does allow you to sort of narrow down those budgets right down to a very, narrow area like a postal code or a specific type of job description, for example. Or if you're the brokerage, you can run a much wider branding, sort of website contextual type of campaign.
No waste again.
Yes, without waste.
Yeah. Question, is digital advertising for everyone?
It's a good question. To some degree, yes. And to some degree, no. And I'll answer that. Based on where most people are spending time today, based on the fact that we spend virtually most of our time online, whether it's on our desktops, on our tablets, and on our mobile devices. As a starting point, I'd ask every realtor to look at, what is their marketing mix today? And, if they're heavily skewed, let's say, with offline as opposed to online, and based on all the data that's pointing to people who are spending more time online versus offline, they need to re-engineer those budgets to be skewed towards digital, because that's where people are, and that's where they have the opportunity to get in front of those people. At the very minimum, you need to be having some form of search and social advertising, and then you can overlay programmatic display on top of that. But with the ability to target to very narrow segments, with digital advertising is applicable to every single realtor. It really comes down to that individual realtors, whatever they have with respect to their available budgets, what their footprint is in the city, what they really need to do. Do they need to brand themselves? Do they have enough listings? Do they not have enough listings? It really comes down to all of that. And I think a lot of clients that I talk to look at marketing and advertising as a cost. In fact, it's an investment that's going to help them build their business. So it is it is something that I highly recommend to everybody. And the nice thing with digital campaigns is you do get that data at the end of the campaign.
On the flip side, if I love digital advertising so much, should it be the only thing I do?
I've never believed in having that, sort of a single vein of marketing. I think you need to look at, where your audiences are, what you're trying to do, who you're trying to reach, and digital marketing may not always be that answer, but it should be part of your overall ecosystem. So the nice thing with digital, it's flexible. You get the data, you can adjust your campaigns on the fly, and you can test. We can test different theories.